So what say you about the speech today?
I think you're wrong on this, Bill. It was not a strong speech. It was a very weak speech, a flaccid speech. It doesn't take any courage to denounce the UN for inaction. It takes being 9 years old and having your eyes open. So I don't give him any credit for that. But let's take the part that you highlighted as part of Obama's toughness. He said we've got to have this deal come through with Syria. He said, and we got to make sure that Assad is keeping his commitments. And he said, quote, there have to be consequences if he doesn't. And that's the point at which you expect the president, who threatened an airstrike, to say that if he doesn't live up to his commitments, the United States will threaten the use of force. Instead, what he says is, if we can't get a resolution that's tough and that threatens consequences, quote, if we cannot agree even on this, then it will show that the UN is incapable of enforcing the most basic of international laws. That is meaningless. Everyone knows the UN does not enforce international laws. It never did, it never will, it never does.
Let me play devil's advocate.
So but just 1 second. What he's saying is, if he doesn't do it, and there's no resolution, it's the fault of the UN and not of me.
I understand that. I get it. But isn't he putting the UN in a corner now to try to get the authority that he feels he needs on the world stage? So he's thrown down the gauntlet and said, look, you going to do something or not? Now, I agree with you that this wasn't a Patton speech. This was a George Patton. But I don't think that works at the UN, Charles. And you've been around long enough to know that threatening the UN or threatening this or threatening arms, that never works there.
To get the UN, he backed the UN into a corner.
Yeah.
He's challenging the UN. He's throwing down the gauntlet. I predict he will pick up the gauntlet. The UN isn't going to do a damn thing.
Let's just talk about the presentation today.
But whoa, let's talk about the substance.
You can't threaten these people because that doesn't work.
He just threatened them 3 weeks ago. He said we're going to do an airstrike.
No, I meant the UN, not Syria. I meant the UN.
But the UN doesn't exist. It's a fiction. It's a meeting room. There's nothing there.
So you would not have gone if you were the president? You would not even shown up over there and tried to once again to compel them to do anything? You wouldn't even bothered?
But of course not, because the reason you go there is to give a speech that everybody will cover. You don't go there expecting that the UN, which hasn't lifted a finger on any struggle, any war, any conflict in 50 years, is going to act. I mean, that's a childish expectation. I can predict to you with 100% accuracy that no resolution will pass the Security Council threatening the use of force.
Yeah, because of Russia and China.
That's right.
So they won't. Right.
So what is it to say, if this doesn't happen, it will show the UN once again has failed? Of course it fails. The only question is, will the U.S., which is the entity that holds up international stability, will it fail? Everybody knows the UN will fail.
All right. I didn't think it was a bad speech. I didn't think it was, as I said, Patton going in there, but I don't think that works. Now,
it wasn't JFK either. It wasn't even, it wasn't Eisenhower. Forget about Patton. It wasn't MacArthur. It was no one.
But it was in that forum, that forum. He's desperately trying to convince, and I agree with you, he's not going to be successful. But I don't think the effort was meaningless. Now, the one thing that caught my attention was he did threaten them one time by saying the American people have had enough of this, and if you guys aren't going to help us out, you're going to have an isolationist America, which is going to lead to disaster. And that's absolutely true.
It is true, and the fact is, if you go to the UN, you don't want people to imagine that America is going to withdraw. What he's saying is, unless you join my coalition, we're going to go home. What he has to say is, I'm willing to leave the United States in places where it has to go when it's essential. He's the one who said that the use of chemical weapons is a moral atrocity and has to be responded to. I didn't say it. He said it. And then he says, oh, but if the world won't come with me, I'm going home. That's a contradiction, and that's weakness.
All right.